Live in 5 seconds. Are we live? We are. So welcome everyone in the Thoughts for Change Makers. As you can tell, this is my first live on the different platforms. First time I'm using the software. And Gunnar with me today is playing the game with me. So let me introduce Gunnar. So Gunnar Habitz is working as sales manager in the ICT industry, so many tech industry in Australia. And before he did APAC and Europe regions as well. So his corporate career in consulting, marketing, sales, and leadership recently added a board of director role in a historical hotel in Sydney. I like it. And what I like the most is that Gunnar has published 24 books, and some of them were translated in multiple languages. And everyone, it was prior to ChatGPT time. So he has been featured in several podcasts and interviews highlighting the importance of relationship building with a partnership view in a giver gain approach. I love that as well. And for the Institute of Managers and Leaders in Sydney, he delivered a masterclass about the transition from an accidental manager to an intentional leader and mentors the upcoming generation of leaders. And also, he's doing some workshops to help executive transition their view on social media from collect to connect by building meaningful relationships in a mutual, fruitful approach. And recently, one of his books is Connect and Act. It features hands-on tips around various aspects from content to conversion. And today, we will talk a bit more about team performance as well. So that's the view we'll get on today's Thoughts for Changemakers. So welcome, Gunnar.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Lison, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on your show, especially also that it's the first time to be on a LinkedIn Live. I had the pleasure, thanks to my book, to launch it twice with a LinkedIn Live in May and in June. So then really like this platform to participate with many people around who can always see it then at a later stage as well. And that gets further into conversation. And that's what's all about. Good idea.
Correct.
Thank you for inviting.
Yes. Thank you. That's true. Like if you can't join live, that's all good because there is gonna be this replay and you can watch it at your own time, and it's gonna also be available on YouTube, I presume. So I like to talk about performance, and I'm curious, Gunnar, what do you define as individual performance? What would be your definition of individual performance?
So let me first talk about when I became a manager and where I got into the individual performance, because many of us who start to work as an individual contributor back in the days, at the beginning of anyone's career, of course, we get certain tasks, certain responsibilities that we have to follow. I'm more of a fan of taking a more holistic view to the whole thing. So then I became a sales manager in Europe working at HP. So I looked after a region of Central Eastern Europe with the idea to get a bit of Western European, more mature country experience into the Wild West or Wild East, so as some people thought it was that way. And then I had the chance to hire and graduate. And the good thing was about it, instead of just measuring him on certain tasks that he got from me or from the job description, I started by hiring in the first place for someone who I can not just only measure by individual tasks to ensure they are tick boxed and achieved and maybe promote, but rather think about a more broader holistic view of it. So then I gave him not the role of my assistant, but more like my deputy or my backup in case I can't be there, to train him broader. So then I wanted him also to, and some other later colleagues as well, to describe my own individual performance for the team, to get them always in a view of what's in it for the individual person to measure in terms of what the job description says and how they interpret it, and also to reflect the same towards the team, because sometimes when we work in a team, we need to ensure everyone, not just the manager, so that then there might be variations of the individual performance when the person sees the team needs another flavor of this, another direction. So everyone can move around this a little bit based on the more broader team approach.
So in fact, you already jumped on my next question. So it's about team performance. So yeah, I'm always keen to understand what's like individual performance at an individual level, but then when you are part of a team, how do you define what is a team performance? What are you looking at?
So the tricky thing of a team is when you have different type of roles which are not the same. So compared to, for example, if I
Mm.
would lead a sales team, I have 10 individuals that all have, let's say, different territories or different whatever way of how customers are organized, then I have
Mhm.
10 of the same. But typically that's not the case. Typically you would have different type of roles where I want to ensure that everyone sees their contribution to the whole team. So if I have someone who's working in a kind of a supporting role, let's say some kind of setup process type of thing, more back end related,
Mhm.
this individual is key for all of the others. So I need her or
Yes.
him to understand the role of the salespeople who should not take for granted that there's someone behind them. So there, in that sense, it should work also that everyone should have a certain understanding what the other roles are doing and to put it like a jigsaw puzzle together. And that is my role as a leader to make that happen, that we build this team not just based on every year we go for drinks or some kind of external training, but that we get this type of integration, how the different roles fit together as a team on a daily basis.
Mm. Yes, and I really like your example with this maybe one person like in the background, but in my world, I call them the shadow leaders. Like they
Mhm.
are so key, but they are kind of in the shadow and they are helping the front leader. So maybe like this sales team that are going out there and they are front with clients. Um, Making sure that the front leaders are thriving and shining in anything they have to do and performing at their best. But without a very good shadow leader, I think the performance can drop dramatically because maybe those front leaders they need to take care of something that could be avoided in their day-to-day job.
Absolutely, but it requires one thing, that the manager of this shadow leader also
Mhm.
understands a bit about the challenges and can help to open doors
Yeah.
that that person, by their definition, cannot do. So, in a typical matrix setup of large organizations, I will need to ensure that those dotted line above from her or his role of, let's say, a supporting role, that I can also engage with them and ensure that everything is understood and that the challenges that we face in our own team, that this is also placed towards the top so that is reflected well.
Mm. And how do you know when you are leading like a high performing teams? Like how do you know like you have a very good team and how do you sustain the performance of a good team?
For me, a good team consists on not only A players, not only those rocket star uh, individuals who by themselves are great so that the sum of the results are great. That is not just only a
Mm.
team, that is more a set of
Agree.
individuals who just happen to be successful as well. I
Yeah.
think the team approach comes into place when you put many things together, which are typically not necessarily reporting to the same boss. Think about in a typical IT sales situation that I have, one of the biggest successes was rather when many areas worked together. You need to have someone who's able to write a proposal in a tender. You need to have an
Mm.
external partner who's able to place this. You need to ensure that they work well together with the sales rep who has a system engineer in the background. And
Mm.
typically, the one who's owning the customer relationship might not be the one who does everything, but is a facilitator of this all. But then myself as a sales leader, my task would be to ensure that this orchestration works well, that the sponsorships are done, and that the common success is a result of a team approach.
Mm. Yeah, a team approach and not a group. When you say that maybe you have like a people, but then they are not really working as a team. They are just a group of individuals. But a team, as you mentioned, they understand each and everyone role and responsibility, personality styles, and it's a very smooth and process. So they they work really as a team. They understand what is the outcomes, they understand what are the processes that we need to go through, and they make sure it's happening the best as they can. But sometimes that we might have some friction. So did you had a situation where you had some friction in the team, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, it reminds me of one of those when I became a sales manager. I looked after plenty of countries. I could visit them. And the challenge was for them that there was someone from Europe coming who is not living in our own area. How does he know actually what's going on? Lucky enough, I knew many of those markets and tried to place myself as their advocate of their belongings, of their concerns towards up, instead of playing the top-down spy. And it needed me to also understand some of their typical market scenarios, some of their customer behavior, so that I knew the challenges, which, for example, in Poland might have been different than compared to France. So I looked
Mm.
after a multinational company in the UK called Tesco,
Mhm.
a bit like our Woolies over here, and I looked after the non UK business. I used to have situation where each of my country colleagues in my team, they had a buyer, but it wasn't there anymore. So then it was basically me to handle this, and they then basically complained that I might have lost a deal on behalf of them in the past, but it was the customer who changed the whole setup. And the biggest thing that I somehow remember was the different needs on myself as a sales leader to understand the difference between coaching someone, bring them from good to great, into mentoring with more hand holding. And that was something that I had to learn, where I could throw overboard my experience from Switzerland, where many things are well organized, and get more into learning the ground up way of leadership. And what I had to do for this, even to learn a bit of Polish language, because my team member who I thought wouldn't perform that well because he was shy speaking English, but it was
Mhm.
only a language barrier. So then I sat in the meetings physically, not Zoom, went there to Warsaw, and actually then I listened to what they said in Polish, and I could see my sales reps working. And the one who was shining was actually not working that well, but his English was perfect. And the one who used to work locally in Polish language was actually the much better person. He just couldn't
Mm.
express himself well in English. So it needs, for me as a leader, I need to really understand also what's going on with the team members.
Correct. Like really be discerning of their challenges, the one that maybe they mention and the one that they are not mentioning. And if we go back to something you said about like the difference between coaching and mentoring, so what did you learn really about those two different ways of like enabling people to reach their full potential? Like, when do you use coaching and when do you use mentoring, for example?
I think it's a rather a situative type of way how to handle it. And if I try to explain it, the word is not black and white, it's rather gray. It's always the shadows in between. So when I say
Mhm.
marketing talks to an audience and a sales talks to an individual, of course, we all need to have some of both flavors. Same as a leader needs to have a version of coaching and mentoring style. It depends on the
Correct.
journey that a person is in. So for that particular example from Poland, I realized at the beginning I needed to have a bit more mentoring to ensure. And he was open and asking and said, "How did you overcome this situation 6 years ago when your market was in a similar area?" So then he was really keen to learn from me to let's say do the things, and after a while, working with him for 3 years, I recognized that I got him over time. Instead of giving him all answers, I rather gave him further questions that enabled him to come on the answers by himself, but with my guidance. But it's a kind of maturity question. And whenever you drop someone into a new scenario, then it also can change as well.
Mm. And maybe you know that I like models now because I know
Mhm.
that you did one of my book review, and I was wondering as well because you wrote like a lot of books as well, if you want to share some of your model that maybe because of the experience you went through, then you could reflect and come up with a bit of structure or key thing that people in this video could benefit.
Yeah, happy to do so. So I personally, I like the way of taking models, taking whatever abbreviation, and I learned in my leadership journey uh, as well, of course, what exists out there, different type of personality styles. So take a Myers-Briggs, for example. In that sense, I'm an ESTJ, or you can take DISC, whatever type of profiling and way of to getting employee engagement surveys done. I came myself with one model to look at different type of flavor, like sitting in the set of a spider. And if you show the slide that I shared with you,
Yeah,
I call it
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
7 eyes model. Funny enough, by being non-native English, for me it means that an I take the letter I, but I write it here as I, like our eyes that we have, and I put it like 7. Think about you are sitting like a spider in the net. You cannot be everywhere at the same time, but you can ensure that you can put your arms out in different type of places, depending. So I took 7 of those words that start with an I when I wrote a book contribution about how someone transitioned from an accidental manager into an intentional leader, and wanted to find out,
Mm.
without training, anything just happened, in which area to get into. And that person wanted to see first what's the impact of the role that person has. In my example, it was someone who was leading customer success team as a software vendor called Daniel in Sydney, without knowing
Mm-hmm.
that one day I would meet a Daniel in that role. Was just purely
Mm-hmm.
by accident. So he would first think about the first I about the impact he can have in his role, not just to say
Okay.
as a leader, this is what I have to do. I need to lead these people. Here are my KPIs. These are the dollars, whatever there, but rather thinking about broader of the impact, what
I
the
love it.
individual
Yeah,
can
what
bring on it.
outside of your job description, what does it really mean? What's the impact of your
Exactly.
role? I love it.
Bigger
Yes.
picture. And very often organizations, when they get fresh blood, that can be from outside of the management team, but inside the company, or someone who
Mm.
joins the organization from hiring from another organization, from company from outside. So then these can add and try to find out what's the impact that they can have on it. And there can be various ways how this person can drive an impact. In my own story, it was an individual contributor who stepped up, who then saw the chance to say, okay, instead of just only going for the individual targets, what impact can I have now in leading the team and driving the whole section,
Mm.
the whole organization forward, and try to find out what influence the team has, not the influence he has on the team, but the influence that the team that he's leading can drive also further. What others are influencing the team members, and how can
Mm.
that work? That it gets further into the kind of spider net. The third one is to find out the word of inspiration. So who who are those people inspiring my team members? Where they take something from? Can I learn from that? So, for example, if I would lead salespeople, and one of them would be might have come from the product side and recognize
Mm.
they like a certain model, like technology adoption lifecycle. Then I thought, okay, that's an interesting inspiration that you got from that. How can I have a take on this one for myself as a leader towards the other team members? How can I even empower my teammate who came with this type of inspiration from outside towards the others? Fourth one here, improve. That gets me into the question of lead versus management. You find often in literature that people say, we would like to have leaders, but we don't need managers. Or you can say,
Mm.
a manager manages processes and a leader manages people or leads people. So
Leads
then
people.
every leader, when managing people, also has to deal with certain processes. And in many organizations, when they're growing fast, the processes are maybe not aligned well. So then, of course, I need to ensure and figure out, can I, as a leader, improve something? Where is it worth to put energy on to improve, or just take something for given and I better put my energy in other areas? So I need to find out what can I improve. But I studied business process re-engineering. It was always my improvement type of mindset on it.
Mm.
The fifth one here is introduce, because in one way as a team, I can have just let them work. Imagine I would
Mhm.
lead a team of young sales graduate from university, and I would tell them, you need to do 100 calls, you need to read so many of them. These are all of the numbers. Not too much of a fan
Mhm.
of that, but rather figure out that the individual knows what the other people around are there. So when I started, I sat in a product team as a solution consultant, and I didn't have too
Mhm.
much to do with finance. I didn't have too much to do with marketing. And I thought that was missing when you only create silos. So, me as a team leader, I always gave others surrounding, let's say, adjacent departments a stage for this one so that I could introduce them and also empower my own team members to go to another team and represent us instead of just only myself. The sixth one is an important one, the interest beyond the role. That
Mhm.
means not just myself, but I got trained in a corporate life, and many of us had the idea to not do one thing for the whole life, but rather say, if you think in 10 years you might to be the country manager of a team, like in my case HB, which are the departments you would like to go through? You've been in consulting. In my case, I went to product, I went to marketing, I went to business development and to management to then further get on maybe in other type of leadership roles. So that only works when I raise an interest what else is out there. But
And
all of
what
these
did
six,
it brought to you? Sorry, let's on this one. What did it brought to you to go in those different teams?
it got me an understanding that a coin has more than two sides, and you can see the same situation from various angles, where normally typical thing that you find that marketing says, why is sales not really going through the leads that they got? And sales would say, oh, the leads are so rubbish that we got. But for me, having been in
Mm.
marketing, moving to sales, moving to leadership,
Mhm.
leading then a team of solution consultant functioning,
Yeah.
and I have been one, that gets
Mm.
me this way of returning. So I see my own former department with different eyes, and I can have a more holistic view and mindset about decisions to be made.
Yeah, and as well, like product team and sales team, sometimes when sales team is like, oh, let's develop those type of features, and the product team is like, no, that's not what we need. Uh,
Exactly. And but here the number seven, while all of the six they look like they're always increasing and getting better, the
mm,
number seventh one here is called imperfect. Um,
mm,
I always had this tendency of doing something as perfect as possible, but only when we accept imperfection, then
mm,
we can grow. When we are set into
mm.
a wonderful paradise of processes with fantastic people around us and happy customers, then nothing is really moving on. Typically, the biggest innovations come from solving problems. So you need to understand and accept something is not good enough, and that includes ourselves. So
Mm.
allow imperfection, allow days which are not good, and that helps us to grow and overcome because we went
Yeah.
through this.
Disrupt yourself, disrupt your conception, and that's thoughts for change maker. That's it. I like this spider thing, and it made me think as well of an octopus, like the octopus trying to.
Right? Exactly that one.
And what advice would you give people to balance this spider, to balance this octopus? Like they will say, okay, I got it, but then how do I balance all of this?
The balance will be different depending the day, depending the time in the quarter, depending the tasks which are at hand. But for me,
Mm-hmm.
it's important to reflect on it and figure out if maybe if an organization goes by quarters, figure out after a quarter has been finished, do a kind of a analysis how that went, what was good, what was not good,
Mm-hmm.
how to tweak it in case you would be able to repeat the similar scenario because
Mm-hmm.
many challenges repeat and come again. So that is a good way. And I give you an example. I looked after the consumer business at HP for a while when people started to buy consumer notebooks for at home. Yeah, it might be
Mm-hmm.
already now 14, 15 years ago. But back then, you either have not enough when the pricing is maybe good and you cannot ship enough, or you have too many of them that cost a lot of money to price it down. And I would bring them into waves like Christmas and back to school and Easter and all of these ones. It's always a repeating pattern. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, it's critical to analyze this type of pattern with the view of potentially changing next time. When you then out of a sudden come to a similar scenario and realize I should have. better analyzed how a similar time frame would have gone. That's not good. So therefore, I'm keen to document whatever's possible, so that when I come into next time in it, I can tweak and realize this stretch didn't has not been worth it last time.
Mm.
So I take out myself on that area and focus more on something else.
Yeah, I like that. That's something I share in one of my newsletter about like having a decision journal. So journal
Mhm.
your decision and how did you make this decision? So in the future, when you make a similar decision, you go back to what was your thought process at that time.
Yeah, exactly. Good one.
And now let's go back into this amazing view. So, do you have anything to add on this model? Sorry, I didn't ask. All
No,
good?
the only thing what I can say, I came on the idea of this model when I wrote, contributed to this book called Leaders of Influence. There were a couple of
Okay.
other authors in it, and it was a nice experience to reflect on it because I never beforehand wrote about it. And it led me
Mm-hmm.
also then into speaking at a master class from IML, and I
Yes.
became there a mentor and
Mm.
also actually I'm a brand ambassador here in Sydney for the Institute of Managers and Leaders,
Mm-hmm.
and I started blogging occasionally on their website about this particular topic.
Okay. That and but the influence, like you mean the number two, which are yeah. So do you want to share more about influence in like general and how because you say that a team can influence. So like I understand quite well like as an individual how we can influence, but what would be your advice for a team to be in an influence mode?
So first of all, if you want to get it into a team, someone need to start to have this type of influential mindset on it. Typically, it would
Mhm.
be an individual. No need to
Yes,
be the manager. It can be anyone.
correct.
Um, but then
A change maker.
come
It could be a change maker.
Yes, exactly. And that exactly that can be somebody who's very experienced in that area. It can also
Hmm.
be someone who comes in new and brings a drive that the team didn't have before. When then
Hmm.
the manager would be the one to foster this, to enable this, and get all others on board because this change maker is there and
Hmm.
can add something to it. And then can be a way to talk about a more strategic approach. What do we want to be seen at? What we think our role might be across the broader organization.
Hmm.
Can we get ourselves some kind of own influencing branding, what type of thing? Take an example of a product organization where the technical guys are often rather seen as we also have them, but they might be the advocate of how to use the product in a better way. So
Hmm.
and they might be able to even pop up on social media regularly as and being perceived there as a product expert. So
Yes.
then getting kind of influencing roles that would be helpful so that then other people inside the company would then finally see this. Oh, we can actually use them more. Apparently, they're seen actually quite well.
Hmm. Yeah, love it.
Internal
So we need
branding.
yeah someone to start somewhere and sustain it and then
Mhm.
capitalize it. So that's like I have a model with performance. It's like yeah, elevate your performance, sustain it, and capitalize on it. And I guess you can do that for influence, like
Mhm.
elevate, sustain, capitalize on your influence.
Oui.
Well, good. So anything you want to leave us with in terms of thoughts, individual performance, team performance, anything that you think that people should focus right now in this current world that we are living in?
Yeah, the world might look a little bit crazy here these days, regardless where we look at. But for me, the important thing is let's not just see that there is some boss who tells us what we have to do, but let's see all our roles inside. What is the impact that we can have? How can I, as an individual, come to my manager and suggest certain ways how to do things? Learn how it works, because typically an individual might not have all information available, but
Mm.
showing up with curiosity, um, show that we want to do more. So that's an important thing, and reflect on the work that we do, not because there's a performance review, but on an
Mm.
ongoing base. Compare ourselves what we do with some others in our field and industry. That for
Mhm.
sure helps. And at the end, that gets even further up into the leadership ranks. So then, for example, I enjoy a lot being also one of the board directors in the historical hotel that you mentioned earlier, because then I
Yes.
can learn that decision making is not just a question of a hierarchical area up to a general manager, but there is a level above. And that level above, owners or board or whatever, they have a completely different agenda. And for me, as someone in the sales area, I would like to utilize this one a little bit more so that then, for example, in one case I had a year ago where the account executive came back and said, this deal will not happen in Q2, it was basically end of June, and asked, what's missing? While it had to go to the board. And I asked if she already partnered with the CIO, what was her role, or CMO, don't remember, I think it was the chief marketing officer,
Mm-hmm.
if she partnered with the CMO to find out that the CMO can present the case well towards the board on different targets, on a different agenda, on a different holistic mindset. And I had to coach her on this one because typically sales organizations like to go up to the normal pyramid, up to a CEO level, and that's it. But the
Yeah.
level above, that is really where a completely different way of decision making happens. And that gives me quite a lot to understand how organizations work, to figure
Mm.
out what's really needed, and have a true holistic 360-degree view. Because on the very top, it's different in the sense of what will happen if you make this decision differently.
Mm.
What does it turn in terms of reputation? What is the personal responsibility as a director on that? So then it's a completely different mindset. So what I start in each and every team, now I continue there. Be curious,
Mm.
that helps.
And by the way, just another question. What do you think about the quarterly rhythm that companies have? Does it really mean something? Like, why most companies they go with quarterly rhythm?
Of course, there are some companies who are traded at the stock exchange who often have a quarterly reporting cycle. There are
Mm.
some businesses, when you take the consumer world, which have repeating quarterly cycles of buying behaviors and patterns, like different type of
Mm.
holidays or let's say
Yes.
Christmas in those countries who observe that.
Mm.
That gets into a certain pattern. Also
Mm.
because we can imagine a wave of more than just a month, because they're changing with the seasons, and that gets us into a
Mm.
different mood of things
Mhm.
that has to do with the quarter. But I'm a fan of not just only sticking at a quarter and take them as given as they are, because
Mm.
sometimes when you take something like a year-on-year comparison, Q2 last year versus Q2 this year,
Yeah.
trying to draw conclusions, you cannot do it without figuring out which deals slipped for whatever reason left and right. So you need to
Mm.
have a more broader view before you can make really decisions on hiring or changing or anything. But
Mm.
people like to remember, oh, how was the same period last year? Where did we go
Mm.
for summer holidays last year? How can we do something exciting this year of the same period?
Mm. Yeah. We like to find like a common foundation of things to be able to compare, even if a lot of things have changed, maybe even out of a year. And sometimes it's just luck, you know, luck, and that's it. So, how do you replicate luck?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So
Um,
you need to distill the numbers, take out the luck factor, get into the core essence of something like numbers, and then figure out what you can do today given the different market
mm,
behavior, which of
yeah,
course changed from year to year.
but of course, some industry you have quite visible patterns that are ongoing year on year. So, yeah. Definitely, because
Absolutely.
it's all about behavior, and you have consumer behavior, and so yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. So yeah, thank you, Gunnar. And so, what's next for you in your professional journey? Where are you at? What's the impact you want to have more of?
Yeah, so in terms of impact, what I would like to see is, of course, is I just published my book called Connect and Act, Systematic Social Selling,
Hmm.
to see more of this in a sense of having more feedback coming from customers, how they engage with the book, how they resonate, or even not. And the tricky thing these days in writing a book is a question of attention span. People don't read so much anymore. So
I
for
know.
me, this is
Like I
it is
discovered that the hard way.
yeah,
Sorry to
yeah. And you know
interrupt.
how it
But, as well
how
with
it
my book, it's like, yeah. So
takes to
let,
write a book and then to read it. But yours is a page turner. So then I wanted to read more about it. So here's mine: Connect and Act.
mm,
I figured out the name for simple reason. If you only collect business cards and you have them somewhere, then what you do with it when you come from an event and take them, never look at it, you need to connect well with the people. And content
yes.
is a way that we can do this. So therefore,
Mm,
after you and I met 5, 6 years ago, and we kept on going in an
touch
exchange because
point.
I see what you do, you see what I
Yeah.
do, so that adds this. But it needs also the acting part of it. Otherwise,
Mm,
nothing is happening. So that's it's this one. There will be a new online course coming for this book in the month of August. So that's good to
mhm,
take it into a more different type of training program,
mm,
and more books to follow. This here has 42 double pages. You can open wherever
mm.
you like, and then you figure out, okay, that's what you learn. So that's a good thing. So against the attention span, to get always some small areas.
Yes. But just a reminder for everyone about the attention span and reading books. Um, we live in a world where we can get some notifications, we are disrupted, and it's hard for people to do some deep work or to really go in depth in things that ultimately will make them win a lot of time moving forward. So
Mm,
sometimes, yeah, I like when you say so reflect, you use this word reflect and yeah, connect. Um use your 2 ears when you connect with people, right? Like really use these active listening skills in this hyper tech world. I think people will remember for that you just listen to them and that you deeply connect with them. um and because that's, as a humans, we are hardwired for bonding with each other. And even if tech is there, I think we really need to emphasize on how to communicate, how to active listening, how to think. And reading books help us think rather than maybe just reading a post on social media. That's helping us to develop our critical thinking skills, to be able to be more discerning about the information we can find online, and so on.
yes, exactly. And that's the difference. That's what I like. And therefore, I strongly also believe that a media like book, where you have lots of thoughts around one topic, has big and bright future in so many ways how we can utilize the content. But one thing is also clear: if you want big change to happen,
Mm,
um, then it makes actually sense to to keep on a topic for a while and go through this. So
mm,
this book exists because I've done a couple of times a 30-day type of challenge on how to use LinkedIn on the topic
mm,
how to complete the profile, how to connect well with the people, how to use content, and how to convert. And these
mm.
four became the pillars of this book, including interviews with other experts. And you are the master of adding expertise from others into your book. So therefore, the more we are listening and look into the expertise we have around us, the more we can learn, and the better we can also put this into our own practice as leaders and as individuals.
And that's a wrap up, Gunnar. Thank you a lot. So thank you for being with me on this first live. I really appreciate that you took some time and sharing your insights. And anyone can find Gunnar on LinkedIn and have another chat with him about what he just discussed. And again, I just want to leave you there out there with thinking of how you can make a change out there in your world and how you can impact, influence yourself and others around you for a better world out there. So thank you everyone. Bye for now.
Merci beaucoup, Lison.